Hey chess players, today we are going to look at a game that was played by a great player from the past, and that player was Gioachino Greco. So Greco was an Italian chess player and writer that was born in the year 1600, and he was one of the first to record or write down full games of chess, and today we're going to be looking at one of those games. So today's game is from the year 1619, and Greco was in Rome at that time compiling a manuscript on chess openings. Some people think that most of Greco's recorded games were his own compositions and not actual games that were played. But whatever the case, Greco's games are exciting and instructional, and this one is no exception. Let's take a look. Greco is playing with the white pieces and starts this game by moving pawn to e4. So even at that time, in 1619, Greco was aware that the center of the board was really important in controlling some center squares and preparing to develop some of his pieces. So his opponent responded with pawn to b6, the Owen defense, with the plan of putting the bishop on b7 and having it on a nice diagonal. Greco responded with pawn to d4, taking control of some crucial center squares and preparing to develop. His opponent put the bishop on b7, like we mentioned earlier, and is attacking the pawn on e4. So Greco defends the pawn and develops his light square bishop by playing bishop to d3. Next, black makes a mistake and plays f5. So this is a mistake because in chess, the king is the most important, most valuable piece, and this kind of opens up the black king on this light diagonal here. So already weakening his position, but black does have a reason behind playing f5, and that is because they see if Greco were to capture the pawn on f5, then black's bishop will be able to capture the pawn on g2 and trap the rook that is on h1. Notice that rook doesn't have anywhere to move, and that rook will be captured. So that's black's idea and why they played f5. And surprisingly, Greco obliges and captures the pawn and allows his opponent to play bishop captures on g2 and trap the rook on h1. But Greco saw a little bit further and saw that this king is exposed because of the opening diagonal on the h5 to e8 diagonal, and Greco finds the move queen to h5 check. So there is only one legal way for black to get out of check, and that is to block the check. We know to get out of check, a player can move their king or capture or block, and the only option black has is to block the check because there is no place to move his king legally, and there is no way to capture the queen that has black's king in check. So black is forced to block the check by playing pawn to g6. And Greco plays a wonderful move. Greco captures the pawn and sets up a discovered check, because if this pawn moves on the next move, no matter where it moves, or if it were to capture, it would be a discovered check from the queen on the black king. And black responds by playing knight to f6, threatening to capture the queen on h5. So Greco plays a really spectacular move, and feel free to pause your video, set up a board at home, and try to find the best move for white. And one move to consider is certainly to push this pawn and put the king in check with the queen. That's a discovered check. And after the knight were to capture the queen, white could then capture the rook and promote that pawn to a queen. And this would be good for white, and the game could continue. But Greco played an even better move. Let's see, I'm sorry, the knight was on f6. And if you found this move, congratulations. The best move for white is to capture the pawn on h7 with a discovered check and sacrifice the queen, because after knight captures the queen on h5, white actually has a checkmate on the next move. Greco saw this. Can you find the checkmate in one for the white pieces? And the checkmate is bishop to g6, and the king is simply in checkmate. There is no way to get out. There's no legal space for the king to move, and there's no piece that can block or capture the bishop, so we do have checkmate. So a very nice, exciting game played by Gioachino Greco. I hope you enjoyed it, and hope to see you next time.